Good afternoon. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting for Friday, November 3rd, 2023. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Chief Deputy, please start us off.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be advised that this open meeting is being broadcast live and recorded for playback by WRPS at youtube.com/WRPS Rockland. Please go to WRPSRockland.com for further information. First on the agenda, community announcements, special town meeting.
Thanks, Mike. As everybody knows, we have our special town meeting coming up this Tuesday night, November 7th at 7 o'clock at the high school. We encourage all registered voters to come and attend and participate. And the main items on it are Articles 9, 10, 11, which is the zoning for Union Point. And there also will be childcare available as well, organized by the Recreation Department. Pre-registration is preferred for that, but I think day of is also fine. So Tuesday night the 7th at 7 p.m. Thanks.
Also, Doug, I want to say something else. The developer has provided charter buses at Leisure Woods at 6 to drive seniors over and back home. So, and it's at the Leisure Woods Community Center.
All right.
So.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda, under new business, review and approval of warrant W19A24H, our Emergency Management Department expenditures for emergency shelter. Doug, you want to start us off? Just give us a background.
Yep, thanks, Mike. I'd like to start, first I'd like to acknowledge most of the people in the audience are on our emergency shelter team. I think they're known to all of you. I've introduced them earlier in this effort that we've been forced to handle, so I want to thank all of them for attending. So I'd like to just start with what's in your packet. In your binder, the first document is the state of emergency declaration from the governor back in August 8th, where she declared a state of emergency because of all the number of people that need housing and shelter. Following that is an email thread which starts with the email that I got from the state on October 12th, which was the first notification that I received that we had an emergency shelter in Rockland at the Comfort Inn. In that email thread, it was in the morning, immediately after that I responded to the state and asked them if they will be providing clothing, diapers, transportation, etc. for the people they're placing in the shelters. And then later that morning, on the same day, the 12th, I forwarded that to you all, to the Board of Selectmen, highlighting that I'd asked the state if they were going to be providing all those materials and transportation, and that I did not think it was likely and that we would probably end up having to incur some of those expenses. On the next page is the press release that I issued the following day, October 13th. Following that is my written notes, which I presented verbally at the next Board of Selectmen meeting the following Tuesday, which was October 17th. I won't read it, but that has all of the updates that I gave that day. Then following that is just sort of one portion of a very long email thread that started after I gave the board an email update on October 23rd. John Ellard had some specific questions which he asked me individually. I answered the things that I knew the answers to and said I'd find out the ones that I didn't. And then I'll just read it because I think this is the whole reason why we're here today. He asked me, he said, if you felt so strongly that these things were needed immediately, you could have purchased these items for yourself. And this was related to one of the things that I highlighted just a moment ago about the $3,000 plus we had to spend on various personal care items. So he said if I felt strongly about that these things were needed immediately, I could have purchased them myself. So I wasn't sure if he was serious or joking, and he responded that he was 100% serious, and that if I felt that need was that immediate and I can't wait for donations, I should write a check myself. So then following that is the email request from John to Mike O'Loughlin and myself asking that these expenditures be placed on a separate warrant because he did not intend on signing off and would like it placed on an agenda for our next board meeting so we can discuss. So that's the purpose of this meeting. Following that is the warrant in question, which the town accountant pulled off on a separate warrant and itemizes each of the things that the fire chief, acting in his capacity as emergency management director, purchased. And these items were ordered, purchased, received, and already distributed to all the folks at the shelter. And then following that, John Ellard asked for us to also include in the packet a document that he researched called Municipal Expenditures, Proper Public Purposes, which is like a white paper from a retired attorney outlining various things about what are appropriate municipal expenditures. And then lastly, what I have up on the screen above me, I thought it would be helpful to summarize for the board and for the public, because John Ellard had also asked me to come up with a timeline. I tried to just fit everything on one slide, and I'd like to just quickly run through that, and then I'll be done. So the timeline, and luckily I'm short, so I think everybody can read it above me. The governor declared the state of emergency on August 8th. I had consulted with some other towns in the region earlier, because I've been reading things in the paper and seeing emails from the state about this whole emergency shelter crisis. So I had proactively reached out to other towns, and not knowing what could potentially happen in Rockland, thought it appropriate to try to get the right people together and just start planning just in case we might become a shelter. So we had a meeting on October 5th, and at that meeting we pulled in on a conference call a manager from another town that was an active shelter, just so we could get a sense of what we might have to deal with. The following week, October 12th, as I mentioned earlier, that email in your packet, that was when I was first notified by the state that we had an emergency shelter in town at the Comfort Inn. As I indicated earlier, the same morning, I requested the state provide those materials. Later that morning, I updated the board via email and talked about the likelihood that we might incur expenses. And after discussion with the emergency shelter team, which I won't read all their names, you can see them here, it's all the key officials in town that would have some hand in this. We supported the emergency management director, who's Fire Chief Scott Duffy, to ordering a variety of supplies for the people that were going to be placed, or that were being placed in the shelter. And those items are all listed to the right on the slide above me. They're basic personal care items. And I'll talk more in a minute about how outrageous I think it is that the state placed people there and didn't provide these things. I'll talk about that in a minute. But if you look on the right, you'll see these are all reasonable things that people should have in an emergency. The next day, put out a press release. And then the following Tuesday was when I gave my first public update to the community at a Board of Selectmen meeting. And then what I put down below in red italics was what I was just alluding to a minute ago. I've been working extremely hard, both publicly and privately, with the state, advocating for them to do a better job, in particular, focusing on the fact that they put people in a shelter, and it was great that they paid for the rooms and great that they paid for the food in the rooms, but I think it's frankly unconscionable that they put people there without getting them any clothes, any of those personal care items that are listed there. So I've talked about that, again, publicly and privately, everything from MMA webinars to individual meetings. Most recently, I think some of my actions have alerted the state enough where I was able to get a private virtual Zoom meeting with the Undersecretary for the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities for Housing Stabilization, specifically just to talk about Rockland's concerns with the shelters and what they might need to do differently. And I think some of the other officials in the audience, based on the input they're hearing from others, can confirm that some of those concerns are being heard and might be addressed. One example would be when we heard the concern about long-term stays, long-term renters that were going to be displaced at the hotel. Once we were made aware of that, I notified the state of that issue. They immediately rectified it. That's one example. But specifically, some of the things that I spoke most recently to the Undersecretary about, again, involved that they need to take care of providing these supplies and clothes for people that they place in their shelter. Focused a lot about coordinating with our school department. They're placing families with school-age children without coordinating with our school superintendent to see whether we even have capacity to service these people. Also talking about seeking reimbursement for all of our costs already incurred, not just the personal care items, but also things like transportation, any school-related expenses, and lost rooms tax revenue after the 90 days that they're going to provide. That's just sort of a snapshot of where we're at, but again, the purpose of today is to talk about the appropriateness of spending $3,200 from our emergency management budget for the people that are staying in the emergency shelter, which is all under the auspices of the state's state of emergency housing crisis. And we have other people here that can help answer questions. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mike, however you want to take it from here.
Anybody from the board have any questions?
I'd like to start if I could, if no objection.
That's fine.
Okay.
You just say it first, but, okay. That's fine.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No,
I'm sorry.
Go right ahead. I just
you
I
run
put
the
it out
meeting,
there.
so, yeah.
I put it out there. Anybody have questions, comments?
Okay.
Yes, sir, I would, by all means.
All right. Can we just go over this timeline? Because this is the first time I'm obviously seeing it laid out kind of like this. So on the 12th, we put out a press release, which you included for this.
13th.
I'm sorry, the 13th we put out a press release. But on the 12th, we had already placed the order. The decision had already been made to spend over $3,000 of Rockland taxpayer money on these items. That wasn't in the press release. Was that intentional, or why wasn't that included?
Well, let's see. Let me look at the press release. The main purpose of the press release, and this was something we talked about in our emergency shelter team meeting, was to alert the public that that this shelter was being opened. And I should have highlighted again, just for the public's benefit, if this is the first time they're hearing this, the town of Rockland had absolutely no say, no decision-making in this shelter being open. So really the main purpose of this press release, to be honest, was to alert the public that it was open. And the quote that I put at the end was really like the main focus, talking about wanting our community to come together and embrace the opportunity for those people that have followed the legal process to seek asylum and to be like a welcoming community. That was really like the focus. So I didn't intentionally hide anything, and obviously we're talking about it publicly here. But that last part, because we're worried about people being fearful. And so our intent was to communicate this is what's happening, and we hope people will be welcoming. So.
Okay. After the decision was made to purchase these items, did you ever explicitly tell us prior to your email on the 23rd that elicited my response that we had spent Rockland taxpayer money for these purposes?
I'd have to go through, we've had a million emails on this, but as I said, the very first day, I indicated we are most likely going to have to pay for supplies that the state is not paying for. And I'd have to look through and see if I had any I may have, I don't know, I haven't gone through the
If you
emails.
did, I missed it when I went back and looked through it.
But I guess my perspective on that would be, there is an emergency in the state, and there's an emergency shelter open, and I communicated that I've activated an emergency shelter team, so.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where, in this case, decisions happen in real time. And the fire chief, as the head of the emergency management department, is authorized to make these decisions without asking the Board of Selectmen for permission to do so.
Yeah, okay. But we should be kept in the loop of those type of decisions, and we weren't.
I think you were. I said right at the
I
beginning.
100% disagree.
Okay.
Well, but it's not funny. We should have been told that this decision was made to spend, again, Rockland taxpayer money for this purpose. It wasn't. When you gave your update on the 17th, which you had, this 2-page list of updates, I noticed that it wasn't asked or mentioned again there. You didn't even tell us or the public at your first opportunity on the 17th.
This would be my perspective on that, Chen. You're asking these questions in a manner that makes it seem like I was intentionally excluding information.
then
John,
if it wasn't
I'm still talking.
Yes,
I can
sir.
finish?
I'm sorry.
You're framing this question in a way that I was intentionally hiding information. That's not the case. That's not true. If we had some other type of emergency where there was like a windstorm or something, and I talked to people about DPWs out clearing the roads, I'm not necessarily going to highlight they spent such and such amount of money on overtime clearing the roads that we may or may not get reimbursement for. I mean, you might draw a conclusion that I was hiding something. I'm telling you, and I'm giving you my word, whether that means anything to you or not, that I wasn't hiding anything.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to say that if you're going to, you give a 10-minute update with 2 pages of a great deal of information, it seems odd to me that would be excluded from that update. And it's things like that I think undermine the public's faith in us. And you are an extension of this board. And if you don't tell people that their taxpayer money is being spent for this purpose, because you have to know that was going to be, when that got out publicly, there was going to be a reaction to that. I can't imagine that you wouldn't be thinking that. I find it unacceptable that at least we weren't told. You mentioned it in passing in that email on the 23rd. You didn't come out and explicitly say it.
So I'm sorry. Were you
No,
done?
I'm done.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So, has the school department, is it their responsibility to articulate all the spending that they've incurred for potential students that they've, had to absorb from that? I mean, at what point,
Well, I'm sorry.
yeah, where do you, I mean, I don't know, I guess $3,000 in a $76 million budget in an emergency, I think, this whole dynamic I find incredibly disturbing. I'm proud of what we've done. I'm really proud of what we've done. And I'm proud, especially if you go back to October 5th, that I had the foresight even to pull people together and prepare for this.
Okay.
And I think if you talk to any other town manager, and if you look at what other towns have done, they've all had to figure this out. And I'm doing extra work now to try to help prevent this from happening in other towns. So you're right. I didn't think that I had to highlight this as like the most significant or even like a significant thing to the public. You're right. I didn't, and I'll stand by that decision.
Okay. I mean, like I said, you usually give very detailed updates, which is great. It's just, like I said, I find it odd that if someone who's very meticulous and detail-oriented and all those good things, that this one detail wasn't mentioned. And I'll just let the public kind of make their own conclusions out of that. So I guess that's it I have on this.
If I could make a follow-up, I didn't mention this in my introduction, but as part of our efforts from day one, we as a group and our new assistant administrator, Courtney in particular, have been working very hard to try to line up nonprofits and other religious entities to help start donations. Some folks had asked at the very beginning, that first day, where do we donate? And we didn't even know what we needed. We had to assess needs and all that. We are at the point now with the efforts that Courtney and others have made where we've lined up Holy Family Church, the Unitarian Channing Church, a number of other individuals and private groups. We've now been able to connect them to the National Guard directly. So going forward, I don't think there'll be any other expenses. It wasn't as though it was $3,300 this week, it's going to be another $3,300 next week, and it's going to be this recurring thing. I think that was going to be a one-time payment, and we've now lined up nonprofits that are going to directly connect with the Guard going forward. So that's another point I should have mentioned earlier.
Okay, and I'm sorry, when you said that kind of prompted something else. So at that 17th meeting, you said we were still assessing the needs, but we had already began to purchase items. So it seems like
that was in reference to the individual needs of the people coming in, as opposed to items that would be absorbed by the bulk of the people that were coming in. Bulk items that everybody was going to use.
Yeah.
Because we have different people. I mean,
Okay.
Look, I don't know. I could go down there with a bunch of extra large winter coats, and it may not fit anybody. So let's find out the sizes of the people that are coming in. If they're looking for clothing donations or stuff like that, it makes sense to be smart about how these donations are done, as opposed to just arbitrarily say, we need sneakers, and everybody shows up with size 11 and a half, and it doesn't work for anybody. So
Right.
assess
I
the
agree.
needs of the people coming in. But these are items these are personal care items that are essential needs that, having heard from the chief and from from other communities that are going through this, none of the communities were obviously prepared for this. The state obviously, made these decisions and they weren't prepared to take care of these people that were coming in. And they've kind of left us in a position where, decisions have to be made very quickly. And, I applaud Doug and the team that he put together, and I applaud Chief Duffy for manning the emergency management department and making the decision in real time, making a command decision. We got a situation that we didn't ask for. As leaders, you make the decisions, and then being that a state of emergency was declared, there's always opportunity to submit that for reimbursement on funds. And we still have the receipts, and at some point, and obviously, people are going to push back and say, well, that's our taxes too. But, so what are we going to do? We're not going to respond when somebody calls 911 because people believe that they're not legally here, when in which case, every one of these people is here legally. They came here through asylum, seeking asylum. That's why they're in this program. This program is available to United States citizens. It is available to homeless veterans. It is available to other homeless Americans. These people just happen to apply for this program. In some of these cases, some of the people that are staying at the hotel are, in fact, homeless Americans that are part of this program. So, I think it was a good thing that was done by Town Administrator Lapp and Chief Duffy and the rest of the team. It's short money for the potential for preventative maintenance for what could be potential bad issues coming from them not having these personal hygiene issues, these essentials rather. And, like I said, a state of emergency was declared. We have the receipts, and we will certainly seek reimbursement, and it opens up the conversation to the churches and all these other groups that are willing to step forward. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts.
I actually pushed for this meeting because we had discussed before that this situation was given to us, but that we were not going to be picking up the costs for things. So as someone who is elected to look out for the taxpayers of this town, I needed to ensure that we're opening this door. We're talking about this because at the moment, it is taxpayer money that's paying for it. And it was not done here, this is what we need to do, so is it okay if we do it? I understand it's an emergency, but we are still responsible for the taxpayers of this town that now find that we are hosting these people, and we are providing provisions for them when we did have a discussion about the fact that we were not going to be paying for it. So I think that in all fairness to everyone who pays taxes in this town, this kind of discussion needs to be open and above board and presented so that everyone knows where we are. Okay, they were purchased and we can apply for reimbursement, but let's face it, the state is now handling a whole lot of things that should be reimbursed that very possibly will not be reimbursed. So in fairness to all those people who elected us to look out for their best interest as taxpayers in this town, we need to open the door so that everybody has a chance to know what's going on.
So John, I completely agree, which is why I was okay with having the meeting. I was never against talking about it. I thought we could wait for the next selectmen's meeting, but then we have a special town meeting that night, and for my portion of the discussion was the purchases were made, and we owe money to a vendor. I don't want to put the vendor in the middle of the squabble between us and the state, and that's why I said if we sign the warrant and submit it so the vendor can get paid, and then we seek reimbursement from the state. I don't want to put Amazon in a position that they don't get paid, and then we can't use Amazon, and it puts our account with them at jeopardy in town, in the town in jeopardy. That was my part of it. The first bill for Amazon is due November 14th, so our next meeting would be November 21st. I didn't want to have, I figured that there might be a big discussion on this, and that's why I put the meeting for today. And that's the only reason that there was any hesitation on my part, because I didn't know which meeting to put it in. And then I finally said, well, we'll just call a separate meeting to get it done. I agree. It 100%, residents should be informed. However, but with that being said, this money for the Emergency Management Department was voted at town meeting as a part of a bottom line budget, with Chief Duffy being the department head for the Emergency Management Department. He has the ability to make those decisions in real time in the case of an emergency. It would have been mentioned at the very next meeting that it happened, but the decision to make that purchase was always going to predate us having a meeting to discuss it, because it's not something that needs necessarily our approval to give Chief Duffy the permission to do this, because it's part of the Emergency Management Department. It's
Right.
already been voted on at town meeting.
All right, can I just put in something? The purchases happened on the 13th. We had a meeting on the 17th. The chief was here that night when Doug gave his update. There was no mention of the purchase. So you're saying that this would have come up at the next meeting. I'm going to say that we had a meeting after these items were purchased, and it wasn't mentioned. So I don't think that's necessarily true, so.
If I may, I know that at that time, with the, with all actions happening in real time, it seems, John, that you're alluding that this information was kept from us. I think that it may have been overseen that this would have been something that was questioned. In my mind, as leaders, Chief Duffy, the administrator, we have people populated in a shelter that we find out the same day, and people that arrive with the clothes on their backs, and people that don't have, and babies that don't have bottles, and people that don't have shampoo, and women that don't have sanitary pads, and you're concerned about $3,302. $3,302 when we have 6,152 people that are paying taxes in this town, and that comes out to 53 cents each. Okay, 53 cents each to ensure that a baby has a bottle. Okay, to ensure that a woman has a sanitary pad when she needs it. And so as leaders, in the state of emergency that was issued on August 8th, had asked that all of our communities come together and welcome these people with care and compassion, and that's what we're trying to do. So if we're going to sit here and argue, and by the way, we're all professionals, we're all volunteers, and right now, we're also taking up everybody's time in this room to argue about the 53 cents each that Chief Duffy had mentioned he's going to be applying for reimbursement, and that would be all of our intent, because we don't want to have to drain our taxpayer fund, but at the same time, 53 cents each is going to help a community that clearly needs help. They came and they arrived with their shirt and, you know, the clothes that they had. And for me, I have 53 cents, and I actually brought whomever opposes this 53 cents. I have a pocket full of change, and I'm happy to provide that.
I'm going to feel the need to respond to that. Okay. I certainly am not suggesting that these people don't deserve to have the basic necessities. All right. I think it's unconscionable that the state, after trying to do this for as long as they have, that they can't get their bleep together after all this time. Maura Healy, you're a failure when it comes to this, and you can quote me on that. 10 months into your job, this is still going on, that people are arriving with the clothes on their back.
But they did.
I
And
agree.
that's what we, as leaders in this town, have to acknowledge and have to deal with.
Right.
I agree with you. It would be wonderful if, when presented with such, that we had all of the resources that they needed, but they didn't. And so, thank you, Chief Duffy, for being as proactive as you have been, because these are people in need. And that's
I don't disagree that they're in need, but it's whether or not the town can legally provide these items for people in need. And maybe, we get some clarification on that, but my understanding of purchasing, it needs to be for an overall public good, not for a specific group of individuals, legally. So that's all I'm asking about. And why isn't the hotel providing this? Why isn't the state providing this? Why doesn't the National Guard have these items that you so passionately talk about? I don't disagree with any of that, but I'm talking about the legality of whether or not we can do this, because the town, as much as we like to think it is, we're not a charity. You know, we can't, if someone in the town has cancer and are we gonna write them a check from the town? We can't do that, no matter how compassionate, how much, sympathy we have for them. That is not what we're here to do. If you want to help people like that, that's what a nonprofit is for, not taxpayer money. And well, I guess we'll hear from John what, his thoughts on this.
So John, before you go, if I can just cut you off for 1 second, I just want to set the stage, because I'm thinking as you guys are talking about what your perspective is and what mine is and like where the gap is, and I think this might help John with his answer. If we were faced with I'll make up a random number, $100,000 bill for something that I didn't have an appropriation for, I'd obviously probably talk to you, I'd probably go to the reserve fund, maybe we'd add it to the special town meeting warrant, I don't know. But this was what I consider a nominal cost, and it's easily absorbed within the emergency management department budget. That's why I didn't think it was a big deal to have to highlight this in a press release and all that. And I think that might help frame John's answer to John's question about whether it was a legitimate public purpose.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Rowley. The town administrator made me aware of this issue a few days ago, and I've been researching it. There's a lot of information out there. I looked at different documents provided by the DOR, Division of Local Services. I've actually spoken with Kelly Donato, who's from their legal division. There's guidance memos, articles in City and Town, some from 2006, some from 2021. But I started with our budget. And the emergency management budget that was voted at town meeting was for a bottom line of $12,900. All right, that's the expense budget. Within that budget, there is a subline item for sundries. Sundries is one of those terms that is probably much more commonly used in the 1800s, but it's generally considered small items. It's commonly used, where it is commonly used, it's commonly used to talk about things that you find at a drugstore, small personal items. So it is my conclusion that we have voted a budget, and it's pretty much the same budget every year with modest increases, an expense budget that includes a line item for sundries. Even though that line item is $500, as long it is legal, and it has been our long-standing practice, as long as the department head does not exceed the bottom line budget of $12,900, it is a legal expenditure within the meaning of the budget. We get into, and the public purpose thing is somewhat amorphous, but I also looked at the legal authority and responsibility of both the select board and the town accountant. Under Chapter 41, Sections 52 and 56, essentially, the select board and the town accountant have similar responsibilities. They have the duty to review warrants to make sure that there is nothing, and these are legally significant terms, that there is nothing fraudulent, unlawful, or excessive within the bills that are presented for payment to the treasurer. If the select board or the town accountant find that there is a bill that is fraudulent, unlawful, or excessive, they're supposed to submit a written reason, obviously to the treasurer and to the department, and say this is the basis why I think it's fraudulent, unlawful, or excessive. They recently added a provision to, I think it's Section 56, which allows the select board to designate one member to sign the warrants. And I think you folks have done that, unless I'm mistaken, it's the chair who signs the warrants every week. But each board member can certainly review the warrants and point out something. It is, and it's my understanding that board members here do that, and that's not the case in some places. You actually look through the warrant and question things. That's part of your statutory duty. That's an appropriate thing to do. But the threshold question is whether this is unlawful. And one of the principles, one of the legal standards that has come up is whether it's for a public purpose or a private purpose. That is not a standard that has any clear definition. A lot of what we do benefits targeted groups of individuals, all right? There's an article with FAQs where they cite an example where a town voted to give employees of a company that were all laid off access to the town gas pumps, and they said, that's not a public purpose, that's basically a private benefit, and you shouldn't do that. But it is not a clear decision, in my mind, by any reasonable standard, this is a legitimate public purpose. We provide different levels of personal supplies, drinks. We open a warming center here in town, and we might provide food for those people. I mean, if we're going to talk about a public purpose or a private purpose that benefits a defined number of people, I don't think you need to look any farther than the Rent Control Board, which we spend tens of thousands of dollars every year for a very small, narrowly defined group of people for their benefit, all right, to protect their rents. It's not a concept, this public purpose, private purpose, it's not a concept that would clearly indicate that almost anything is unlawful. In this case, by reading all the available material, I believe that this is a lawful expenditure, that there is nothing that prevented the chief from doing this. I think he did it in consultation with a number of other professionals. Again, I don't find that it's unlawful at all. In my conversation with Kelly Donato from DLR, she could not also tell me that this is definitely unlawful. Thank you.
Well, I also spoke with the lawyers at Division of Local Services, and I don't know, they were extremely vague about giving, like you said, it's definitely a gray area what is a legal expenditure or, a unlawful one.
That's kind of what we do as lawyers.
I understand that. The law is written just vague enough so that two lawyers can argue about it to the end of time. So who, I guess, at the end of the day, whose decision is it if it is a legal expenditure or not?
In this case, the select board could vote to say they consider it unlawful.
Okay.
All right? It can't, I don't think by any definition you could consider it fraudulent. I'm assuming that's
I
not
agree.
a question.
Nope.
I don't think you could say it's excessive. The cost of the items
Within the
seems to be fairly reasonable.
I agree.
So you would submit it to be unlawful, but before the treasurer did that, I assume that they would ask for a legal opinion and say, is this in fact break the law? And looking at all the guidance, all the circumstances, in my opinion, it is not unlawful.
Okay. But at the end of the day, we could vote to deem it that. Is that?
You could, but
Okay.
but that's, obviously unlawful is that's a term of art, a term of legal significance, and I would have to review it and decide, to do that. Now, you could disagree with it, the board could go out and get another legal opinion, or as individual taxpayers, you could conceivably file a 10 taxpayer lawsuit. I think some of the cases that they talk about in some of this DLS guidance were in fact 10 taxpayer lawsuits, challenging certain expenditures. But again, I would see no basis to deem this unlawful.
Okay. Because I actually got that same thing from 2021. Cause it's funny, because I was actually going to mention that one with where they laid off, 10% of the town came from one particular company. And there was one bit in their answer that I thought was interesting, and well, they said that it probably wouldn't be a proper use, and I'll just read the highlighted part here, that cities and towns have no power to appropriate money to persons whose situations may appeal to public sympathy. That's from the Division of Local Services in one of their answers. And I think that's what they're getting at, is they don't want us making emotional decisions with taxpayer money. That's my take on it. Again, I think it's unconscionable that people arrive here, human beings arrive here with what they have, and I'm not begrudging them that at all. But it's not, it's a who should pay for it? Why isn't the hotel paying for it? Why isn't the state paying for it? That's my big objection to this is, and I think if we had, back on October 12th, if we had put out a request, if we bought the stuff on Amazon, why didn't we set up like a gift registry like you do for a bridal shower or a wedding shower? We would have filled that within 24 hours, without a doubt. But instead, we made what I think to be a pretty quick decision to buy these things that we could have saved $3,300, $3,200. And I know it's a nominal amount of money, but it's a mindset that why are we spending taxpayer money if we don't need to?
So we didn't want babies pooping on the floor in the hotel.
I agree, we
That's
shouldn't.
why.
But we could have done it without spending taxpayer money.
A lot of
Not
the,
in that immediate. It was
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
the state's doing it in real time too. We're doing it in real time. It was really literally just thrown in our
So
laps.
at the time, there were 26 people at the shelter, 15 children. I don't know how many of them are pooping on the floor up there. I don't know. We never got a breakdown.
If
of
they
how
don't
many.
have diapers, then.
Well, I'm a parent of two. I understand how that
Yeah.
works. But we don't even know. Were there children there of that age? We don't even know. Why didn't we put something out publicly? Rockland is an incredibly generous town. Tiffany, I agree with
True.
you that I would donate gladly to pay for some of this. That I'm not, saying that I'm against these people here. I'm glad that they're here. I'm glad that, they're getting an opportunity to find safety from wherever it is they're coming from. Don't get me wrong, I'm not some kind of a, villain here wearing the black hat. All I'm saying is that we could have done this differently. We seem to, all right, people, we found out they're coming on the 12th. We ordered the stuff on the 12th. We're told that we're still evaluating what we need, but we've already ordered $3,200 worth of stuff. It could have been done differently, and it could have saved us. Again, I get it. It's not. We have a $76 million budget. $3,200 is nothing. But again, it's that mindset that why spend our money if we can get it from somewhere else?
So,
but I
can I respond, Mike, before I lose my train of thought? Or, I don't want to cut you off, you're the chairman, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Well, I just think this was done as preventative maintenance. My guess is that Chief Duffy, having been in these meetings, said to himself, having talked to other towns where this has gone on, has said, we're going to need these items. We'll build a reserve so that we have the ability to supply these for that first tranche. And then it happened.
Yes.
So I think the fact that it happened on the 12th and the order went in on the 13th, my guess is it was a proactive order on the chief's part to be ready for an emergency situation that he felt, because we had a hotel in town, we have hotels in town, could happen, and that this was a purchase to prevent the situation from affecting us here in town. Doug, you have a point.
Yeah, I'm just going to be really blunt. It's easy to Monday morning quarterback. It really is. I stand by that decision. We had to jumpstart the process. Since that time, we have donations lined up from churches and other nonprofit groups going directly to the National Guard. But I got notified that morning, there are people here right now, and we're like, holy cow, like they're going to need some basic necessities because the state said they're not providing it. That's the hand we're dealt. And it's easy now to look back and say, why didn't we start a fund drive and get all this stuff? People needed things immediately.
Right.
It was a jump start, and it was a nominal amount. The last thing I would say is getting back to the earlier discussion about public purpose versus private purpose. This kind of thing happens in towns. And I'll give a great example of how we had to absorb a private purpose. At a recent town meeting, we voted, and we've spent a lot of money already, and we're going to be adding a whole bunch of money to our budget next year, because a group of people came in with a box from a private cemetery, the Mount Pleasant Cemetery, and said, here you go, Mr. Town Administrator, it's all yours. And we've had to absorb this private expense, this private land, and all the recurring expenses here forever after, because that was the hand we're dealt. And so that kind of thing happens. And I could probably come up with other examples too if I take the time.
So I just want to give Chief Duffy an opportunity to reply to some of the things that have been brought up.
Thanks, Sean. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, Doug, thank you for leading the effort. he was proactive in getting us started on the 5th. All the way back, and my timeline does fall within Doug's timeline. But mine starts a little bit earlier, going back to August and September, through the Fire Chiefs Association of Massachusetts, through our monthly meetings. I'm also on the board of directors for the Fire Chiefs Association. So I have 2 meetings a month with them, and with chiefs that have migrant sheltering within their communities. And it was a very big topic of discussion on what was needed, what other towns are doing, specifically Westboro, where I got the idea. Westboro was providing welcome packets to them with your basic necessity needs. We found out on the 12th that 20 rooms were rented and that we were getting families. Prior to that, on the 5th, we had kind of discussed what would families need. I started researching, potential items. Placed the order on the 12th. Those orders probably didn't come in till probably October 23rd, 27th that week. Some a little bit earlier, but most within that week. I don't think between the 12th and probably the 23rd that I ever updated Doug on what I purchased. So he probably didn't know, Mr. Ellard, to update you on that. I probably just said, hey, I ordered some items. I didn't give him any type of breakdown of what I ordered. We delivered those products on the 26th and 27th of October, I think. So maybe a little bit earlier. I don't have the exact emails in time. And John, I do agree that it is unconscionable that the state has done this throughout the state, to the tune of what we are hearing is $54 million a month to house. There are a lot of uses that $54 million could go to. However, we get into, so a state of emergency had been called. It is a state of an emergency. It's an emergency shelter. Why do we have an emergency management department if it is not to respond during an emergency within the state? Whether it's a state declared emergency or a town declared emergency. So getting back, so that's one of the big reasons why I, hopped in and made the order so quickly. I felt it was a no-brainer for the emergency management director. We talk about private versus public funding and spending in a shelter. Let's think of this. 261 Union Street, Gateway Apartment. Numerous apartments. We have a fire in that building. We're going to have to open up a town shelter for those people. Not much different. That's a private apartment complex where we would have to house that. Is the difference because that they're Rockland citizens and then instead of migrants? I certainly hope not. You talk about public faith in the board. I certainly would hope that the majority of the public in Rockland would be happy that you allow me as the emergency management director and fire chief to make expenditures to help those in need. So I would imagine that most would be applauding your efforts and applauding you as leaders to allow me to express, to practice my leadership. My guess is that those that are complaining to you are just racists and xenophobes. Like we said, so, I'm pretty dismayed what we are seeing on social media and some of the stuff that's being released. And again, racist and xenophobic attitudes. We as a country, we're on a knife's edge. We're on a knife's edge of becoming 1940s, 1930s Nazi Germany, and 1950s Southern America. And it's horrible. We used to be proud to say we're a melting pot, or we're a boiling pot right now. And that type of leadership that we're seeing at the national level is trickling down to the state level. And it's unfortunate because I think we're seeing it here today. So I just want everybody to know that that type of toxic leadership is not welcome here, and we don't want it. And I will not bow down to it or take any directive from it. So that being said, I am more than pleased to work under Doug's leadership and the leadership of everybody here, because that's where the decision was made. And whether it's a legal expenditure or not, it was the right expenditure to do. It was for humanitarian needs, and I'd do it again.
Anybody else in the audience like to comment? I don't usually have that.
I have
Oh,
some,
did you have something else?
well, I'm not in the audience. Anyone
Yeah.
out there want to say anything?
I have a question.
Well,
Is there a budget for that? And if we don't have a budget already, should we implement a budget for that? Because things like this are probably going to happen again.
There is a budget. It's under Sundries and Emergency Management.
Thank you.
Dr. Crum?
Thank you. Until this morning, I've spent a couple weeks being fairly angry with the state. And very sympathetic to Mr. Ellard's concern. I think we love to say that all politics are local, but in this case, I think local politics come back to bite us, and we are being forced as a town to argue over things that are really an issue of Congress in this particular case. I had the good fortune to speak directly with the Commissioner of Education this morning, and the term state of emergency has new meaning to me because of that. I do feel that the state is at as much of a loss as how to deal with this as we are as a local community. I think they're unsure of where their funding is coming from, but I do think state of emergency is a very important term, one that is thrown around and perhaps not truly thought of, but I think this really is an emergency, meaning we don't have the capacity, we don't have the funding, we don't know where it's going to come from, but Congress is going to have to help. That said, bringing it down from 30,000 feet, how is it affecting the schools? We currently have 9 new students enrolled in the district. We are looking at maybe as many as 12 as of next week. Jane and I are meeting on a regular basis with our English language learner staff to make sure that they're not freaking out, to make sure that they feel supported. And I will say that Rockland, the state of the Rockland School Department, one thing that you've heard from me over the last 10 years has been our changing demographics. When I came here in 2012, we had 24 English language learner students in the district. We now have nearly 350. We have adapted, we have changed, we have grown our department, we've supported them with staff, with networking, but we are full. Our capacity to support non-English language speaking students is at capacity. I feel un-American saying that out loud because the fact is we will do whatever we have to do to serve any student that comes through our door. That is the law, and we will comply with the law. That said, I am incredibly proud of the attitude of my staff. I am incredibly proud to serve with Doug and with Chief Duffy, who I think have led in this situation extremely well. But I do think that we are fighting amongst ourselves over something that is bigger than us. And I would just ask that the community come together and not divide. I would ask that we have confidence in the leadership in this room because I think it's very strong. And I would ask that we wait and be patient and kind to one another moving forward with this. Again, I understand very much where Mr. Ellard is coming from. I have spent a tremendous amount of time being frustrated with why isn't this happening? Why isn't this happening? Why isn't this happening? Following my call this morning, I realized that people at much higher levels than me are asking themselves the same questions. So I would just ask that as a community, we continue to do things the Rockland way. This is a very special place. We are pushing all the right buttons at the state level. I have had meetings with Senator Keenan, meetings with Representative DeCoste. We are on the phone with the Department of Education at a very high level on a daily basis. We are asking them to flip the switch. We cannot handle any more non-English language speaking students in the Rockland Public Schools. And in the big picture, that is the biggest cost facing this town. So we are pushing all the right buttons. Again, every time it comes out of my mouth, I feel un-American. I honest to gosh do. But it's a fact, and my job is to look out for the people of Rockland and the students of Rockland, and that is what we're doing. I feel we're doing it very, very well, and I just hope that we will go forward and try to just keep in mind that the issues that we're struggling with are bigger than us, and they need to be addressed, and I just don't want to see it divide us at such an important time. That's all I have. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, I do.
Yes.
Do the non-English speaking students have the option of school choice, like to go to another town that might have?
Which students are you referring
The
to?
non-English speaking?
The 350 that we currently have?
No,
or-
no, the ones, you're at capacity, so any overage on those students, do they have school choice?
I don't know what the plan will be for them, but
Okay.
just as the governor has said, we're full at the end of the month,
Yeah,
that doesn't mean they're going to stop coming.
right, and that's what I'm
Manhattan
saying.
has seen that, other cities,
Uh-huh,
you know, it's
Yeah.
an immigration problem.
right, I know.
It's a
I know.
Congress issue.
I get it, I
Yeah,
get it.
so-
But in real time, I mean, maybe like Marshfield or Situate, one of
Oh,
those
believe me.
places might
If
have.
we get 50
room.
students
Uh-huh,
at the Comfort Inn in the next 2 weeks, I will be publicly asking
yeah,
our kind and generous friends in local communities
Yeah.
to share
okay,
in the burden of
That was my
educating,
question.
financially and otherwise,
Yep.
because we don't have the capacity.
Yep.
So we'll see what the other towns say. Would they like to take 15 students next week?
Mhm.
And we'll see how it
Yep.
goes.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, anybody else?
Thank you.
Yeah, I had some thoughts that I'd like to share. Bear with me. It's 5 index cards worth. So I can safely say, I think, that no one on this board supports wasting taxpayer dollars at all. We fight to not do that constantly. These are my thoughts on the migrant situation. To quote Robert Kennedy, when you see wrong, try to right it. And when you see suffering, try to heal it. This is an issue that defines who we are in Rockland on a human level, okay? I grew up in Washington, D.C., which is a very transient place. I was the only white Jewish kid in a black and Hispanic neighborhood. So the two things I know how to do well in life are cook soul food and fight. And my kids, my 2 older kids, also grew up in the D.C. area, and they had every ethnicity imaginable in their neighborhood, in our neighborhood. For our children, befriending and interacting with a rainbow of people bred compassion and a larger worldview in learning about different cultures. So, let's see. The next point I want to make is about hypocrisy. When I waitressed at Anita Marie's and helped my sister-in-law out, it was a community hub. People were very vocal with their opinions. I heard the more conservative folk, including churchgoers, talking about people on welfare with vitriol, saying things like, why don't they just get a job and pull themselves up by their bootstraps? Why should my taxpayer dollars support them? My, how times have changed. The Facebook rhetoric now that migrants are at the Comfort Inn is, we must take care of our own first. There's homeless families at the Comfort Inn. So what is it? Should they pull themselves up by their bootstraps, or should we help them, right? So, John, the way I understand your position is that you believe spending money on basics for the migrants at the Comfort Inn from town funds is a waste of taxpayers' money?
I think that there are other ways that we could have accomplished it that wouldn't involve spending taxpayer money.
Okay. So it seemed that when the Community Development Office representative was here, and we needed to vote to spend funds to help an elderly couple fix their house, you voted against it for similar reasons?
Well, no, from my recollection on that, if I may,
Yeah.
is that was a really large expenditure for one particular resident versus saving that money to spread it around to help multiple
Well,
residents.
there was
for
two
smaller
residents,
projects.
but they were in immediate need. They
Well, it's
needed
one
mold
whole-
remediation. And we're being paid back plus interest for that.
Right. Yeah, no, my point in
Right.
that was I'd rather spend it to help more than less.
Okay.
So just to
Okay.
clarify that.
Okay. And my next point is, generally, we don't dictate to heads of departments how to run their offices or appropriate their budgets. When we have questions about it, we generally ask them, or I do. I mean, I nitpick through the warrant every single week. I find mistakes sometimes. I have questions often. And Doug is just really helpful with getting the answer right away, and I appreciate that. So, so much like Scott's decision to spend his emergency budget line item on the governor's declared emergency, I also remember you grilling Allison Sullivan over the coals when she wanted to improve her department by changing the revenue turnover section of the DOR financial policies, and you vehemently denied you grilled her because she was a woman.
I didn't grill her because she's a woman. I
Okay.
still maintain that.
So I thought to myself after that meeting, I wondered why you extremely grilled her at that time. So I decided to do some research and query a neutral party on that.
Okay.
I called Eric Kinshirf, who's an outside accountant we use from time to time, and he guessed it was because he and Allison had partnered to clean up the abundance of mistakes you made in your time as our treasurer.
Okay. Show me where any of those mistakes are
Okay,
listed
guys,
in the
let's
audit.
let's focus.
This
Let
on-
me
is
finish.
outrageous. I'm
Let's-
sorry.
No, I'm
focus on-
going somewhere here, I'm
Okay,
going somewhere.
I'm really curious to see where you're going with
I asked him what he meant by that, and he explained that it took them 6 weeks to clean up the mess in the Munis system, and for this service, we paid him $16,700.
Okay.
Is this not wasting taxpayer dollars?
It would be. if
Is
that was true.
this meeting the epitome of hypocrisy? So I called Eric, he was driving in his car, and he said that he had, because I said, do you have the breakdown of those costs? And he said he did, but he was driving, but he had emailed it to Doug.
Okay.
And so I called Doug, and he emailed it to me, and so to save you the time of doing a public records request, there it is right there.
No, talk about grandstanding. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this,
Okay,
and I would
all right.
definitely address this.
All right, so.
That's
can-
all I
can we-
have.
Okay.
Can we
Plenty.
just get back to the issue down at the Comfort Inn
Yep.
and the expenditure from the Emergency Management Department? I don't know where the board wants to go with this. We have a bill to pay. We have a vendor that's expecting payment. I'll entertain a motion to, I'd say I'd make a motion, or entertain a motion to pay this bill.
Motion to pay this bill.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second, all those in favor? All those opposed?
Opposed.
Okay. I think at this time, maybe just to clear up some confusion going forward, I'm not sure if it's necessary, but I think I'll do it anyway. I'll make a motion to continue to authorize Chief Duffy as Fire Chief and Head of the Emergency Management Department to access the funds of the Emergency Management Department as he sees fit during the course of a state of emergency without necessary prior authorization from this board.
Wait, can I ask a question about that?
Okay.
Do you expect that there are going to be additional expenditures? Because I know that now that we've opened it up and asked for donations, and why don't we really explore that before we pour money on this?
Well, I think, I'm not saying that Scott should turn around today and make another order, but to prevent having to come back and have another meeting, again, if the need does come up, if we do go out and we do find that we don't get as many donations as we're expecting, and there's another need that comes forward, then I don't think it's necessary for us to all sit in a meeting to question what he did. I'm just saying, I think we go back to how the department is run, but I think it might be appropriate to make a motion to solidify that he has the ability to make these purchases. Obviously, communication is something that works out, but it's not necessary for him to ask us permission to do so if needed, based on what we're able to collect from the community, isn't enough.
Okay, so as long as there's an effort.
Oh,
to-
of course it's going to, yeah, I'm not saying just.
It's
I'm
already
not
done.
saying a blank
Can I
check by
speak
any
to
means.
that?
Right.
I believe that we should be all set. As I said earlier, this was a one-time expenditure to jumpstart something on day one because the state dumped it on us. Since that time, we have connected churches and other nonprofit groups, and through the regional response coordinator, through the National Guard, we've connected them directly. So we're actually out of that loop now. So we're not anticipating any additional expenses. So the way I'm hearing Mike is if there's something unanticipated that's coming up. But
Something
we
unanticipated.
do
But
believe
at the
that
same
we-
time, let's get some clarification on what the abilities are of the emergency management department manager. If Scott has to run the generator down at the warming shelter, does he need to seek authorization to use whatever gas that he needs to purchase for it? No. So the use of those funds, falls under the emergency management department, and I think it's appropriate for him to, be able to make those decisions based on the real-time information that he's handling during the course of a state of emergency.
Yeah, I mean, I think the warming shelter or center would be different because it would be open to the entire town who
I get it.
need to go in.
I get it, but I just don't want to be something where Scott feels as though he can't perform his duties as head of the emergency management department because he's afraid that he'll be questioned for any purchase that he makes. Because now we've kind of opened that where we're questioning a purchase that he made. Regardless of what it is, we're questioning the purchase made by a department head that has the ability and the right to make that purchase in a public meeting. So I think from a standpoint to just give him the assurance that he can continue to do his job in that case, without having to seek permission from us for expenditures from the emergency management line budget.
Can we put in a caveat that if there is something, say, of this nature, that we report it to the town so that, in a timely fashion, so that they know where their tax money is?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think it's one of those things that the second that he knows it has to be done, then I think maybe he calls Doug calls us, and then Doug maybe puts out, some kind of a release that's to let people know. But as far as his ability to do it, it's his ability.
Personally, I was not questioning his
Yep.
ability to, his need to do it.
Yep.
My concern is you have a lot of the population in this town who is living on a fixed income.
I hear you.
And they are concerned, I'm paying taxes and, so as a duly elected official to represent these people, if we can make it a caveat that if you have a problem like that, you're gonna have them, we know that. But can we report it so that people are not out there building stories?
Oh, yeah.
Because, we all hear them. They're using our taxpayer money for. Let's put it out there. If you put it out on the table, then everybody has a chance to digest it in their own way. They get to decide whether, okay, personally, do I think that was a necessity? No. Am I gonna live with it? Okay. But when we don't put it out there, then nobody has a chance to decide whether they're for this, whether they're against this. They're going to end up calling you and screaming at you. We know no, I understand that, but we know that there are things that come up. But the more we can put it out there so that people can digest it in their own way, the easier it's going to be. The more sympathy they're going to have for these people who don't have deodorant. But if we put it out there so that we are all on the same table, we put it out there and let everybody look at it, not 3 months from now. I know that you have an emergency budget. I get that, and I know that there are things that come up that you don't have to ask us for. But how about if we just keep everybody informed? That was my point.
May I ask a question? So what I think I hear you suggesting is that anytime there's an expenditure from the emergency management budget, that it gets reported out publicly? Is that what I'm hearing?
Even if it's
Okay.
just a note, you're here at every selectmen's meeting. So even if it's just a matter of, okay, just so everybody knows, we had to do this because we have babies who don't have bottles. We
So,
get
I
So
that.
is this
So-
just in charge?
Yeah, so That was my question,
Yeah,
was,
for the
is
emergency
this only,
shelter
like,
or-
what about the reserve fund, for example? Every time there's a reserve fund appropriation, we expend it, does that have to be publicly disclosed? Like, I'm curious about why we have to publicly disclose specific discretionary things within this one narrow thing, and I think it's because there's a hot issue right now.
Well, and
so
we
my
had-
question is, is this only limited in emergency management and no other
We had
department or
had a
budget or
discussion
account in
on the
town?
fact that these people being sheltered in this town, it was not going to cost the taxpayers of Rockland anything.
I don't remember us talking about that. I remember the lieutenant governor at the meeting I went to said that she wants to make every town whole, and they have the intention of making every town whole. But there was no promise of that. And I don't think anybody knows that answer at this point. So, unless I'm wrong.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get clarification if this is limited to only emergency management, and so, and this is an interesting conversation. I'll leave it at that.
I mean, I
Obviously,
think
you guys
more
decide.
transparency is better than less. So if it's just emergency management or anything, any expenditures that are, yeah, I would say any emergency management expenditures should be.
Anything that's out of the
Yeah.
ordinary, this is not ordinary.
Correct.
So
So, I
I will
mean,
say,
if we-
I will say to the board and to Mr. Elden and Ms. Shortall, that if you don't trust me to spend emergency management fund appropriately, replace me.
That's not the point.
No, it is the point, because where is this going to stop? These funds were spent on an emergency shelter. Why didn't you want these funds spent on emergency shelter, John? What? Why?
Why didn't I want these to be spent on because it's taxpayer money, it should be spent for a greater public good. This is too narrow of a
It is a
focus.
greater public good.
I disagree.
Because when you read through social media, there are parents concerned that the shelterees, the children of the shelterees are going to their schools. They're concerned of health issues, and so where does health start? It starts with cleanliness,
Agreed.
okay?
Yep.
So wouldn't we essentially be also protecting our children that are in the schools? Now, I'm not saying the shelterees are dirty or disease-ridden or anything like that, but that's certainly what's being said on social media. Okay? So this is for the public good.
Okay, why isn't the hotel providing this stuff? I mean, every hotel I've stayed at has provided soap and shampoo to their guests.
Yes, they have. And the concern was is if they didn't. But what you don't get at a hotel are razors, shaving cream.
Okay.
Just in case, somebody did come with lice, because some are coming right up from the border. You see the items, Q-tips, just basic everyday needs that when you open your shaving kit when you go on vacation, which this certainly isn't a vacation for people, are in your shaving kit or in a makeup bag. They're necessities. They're necessities to keep them healthy and in turn keep our public healthy. So if you don't trust me to expend the funds of the Emergency Management Department, you're more than welcome to replace me as the Emergency Management, John.
Well, that's not my decision, and so you have a problem with updating us when you make expenditures out of it?
I do not.
Okay.
Just
that's
as
all we're
when you
asking
called
for.
me the other night, I explained to you how, why,
Yep.
and what we did. I have never not answered a telephone call from any member of the Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
And I've provided emails, I've provided all the information. But to say that, oh, I spent $500 to get the emergency management generator service this year, I think is a little ridiculous.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
I'm just trying to find a middle ground here, so just out of,
I'm not sure that there is. I
Well-
mean, I think that Chief Duffy makes a great point. He
Yeah.
has been put in that position as the Emergency Management Department Director.
yes.
We've been elected by the residents. We put him in that position. So
I know.
we trust him to make these decisions. I would suggest, I come in at least once a week. I call Doug often if I have questions. Doug calls me, I call Chief Duffy, I call Chief Zioli, I talk to Dr. Cron, I talk to Attorney Clifford, not as much these days, but certainly a few years ago, quite a bit. I would suggest just making the phone calls and making it part of your routine to touch base with the people that are in these lead roles in our town in order to find out better what's going on. Because not everything happens, not everything is necessarily found out at a meeting. It's updated at a meeting, but maybe you find out about it the day before the meeting, or maybe you find out about it 3 days before the meeting. When I build an agenda with Doug, we have a lot of information, and then we decide what goes on the agenda. And a lot of that is the updates that the board is getting, that the residents are getting. You know, we have a selectmen's meeting the first and third Tuesday of every month. That's us updating, you know, the residents. There are things that happen between those meetings. And then when we have a meeting, our second meeting of the month is the 15th, we go 3 weeks without a meeting. There's things that happen and there's decisions that need to be made without the quorum of the board making that decision. We've empowered them, our department heads in this town, to make their decisions. And I think we should stand by them to allow them to make those decisions. And if there's something that needs to be communicated out there, you know, it's crazy how social media works, and it's crazy how gossip, you know, just continues to, how people have the information before we have the information.
Misinformation.
You know, I heard that there were people, I got an email, a text message from somebody in town saying that he heard that there were people staying at the hotel, that there were migrants that had been shipped in. And I said, that's absolutely not true. 10 minutes later, Doug sends me an email. Hey, just so you know, this has happened. So somebody staying at the hotel happened to reach out to this person. So there's a lot of information that goes around and around and around. I think we as a board do a pretty good job of reporting it out there as we have it. You know, and if it doesn't come up every single day, it comes up certainly at our meetings. And if it's something that, you know, to Chief Duffy's point, he didn't talk to Doug. He didn't update Doug on the amount of what was spent or that the purchase was necessarily made, because he doesn't have to in that moment. You know, he didn't do it in time for that meeting, but he did it after that. And Doug knows, and Doug reported it to us. So it's like, communication is never going to be perfect with any of this, and you guys will find that the longer you sit on this board. I used to do office hours. I used to meet up here with residents all the time. And then people would complain on social media, and then they'd never show up to meet me. Nobody would come up here. I'd sit up here for 3 hours by myself. But it was a commitment that I was making to allow people to hear it right from me, what is actually going on. Communication is very difficult, you know, and the first question I ask people is, did you watch the selectmen's meeting? 99% of them say, I don't have time for that. I don't have time to watch the selectmen's meeting. Well, I don't have time to go door to door either and knock on their door and update them on everything that we do at the selectmen's meetings. We created, years ago, the social media platforms on Twitter and Facebook in order to report out the actual information to the residents as it becomes available to us. It's amazing to me to this day how many people question the legitimacy or make up a different narrative as to what is actually being disseminated by the town. And it's disappointing, but I think it's very important, and it's a real slippery slope to not empower our department heads to feel comfortable in making decisions and making these purchases. But I will say, obviously communication is something that we can all work on. I'll say, in my experience, Chief Duffy is a master communicator, and Doug Lapp is a master communicator as well. So I don't have an issue, but I think if you want to find answers, if somebody comes to you in the community, call them, get the answer, and then put it out there after you've heard, all right, so that you're not being frustrated by the fact that you're not in the know. I get people asking me stuff all the time, and I go right to the people that I know are going to know the answers, and then I refute it, or I let the person know that they're in fact right. So I think that's on us to really look at. You know, I'm going to table that motion. I don't think it needs to be made. I think we just continue to operate in the manner that the departments continue to operate in. But that first motion has passed, that we will pay that bill. And if nobody has anything else, I'll move on to old business.
I have one more thing. In the warrants that I do every week and go through, I have never found anything questionable that Chief Duffy has spent anything on, or mistakes. In fact, I have found that he is saving money for taxpayers all the time. Chief Zioli too. So, that's it.
Okay, moving on, old business, 11/7/2023, special town meeting if needed. Doug?
Can I just make one last comment on the last thing? Like, all I'll say is this, like, if the intent was, and I don't mean to reopen the conversation, but I feel like I'm obligated to tell you guys what's on my mind. If the intent of this is, like, because where I'm going is, like, why are we focusing on public disclosure for such a nominal amount? And so if the intent is, well, it's an unfunded mandate and we should let the taxpayers know, I could spend hours at every meeting talking about unfunded mandates that hit this town, and I talk about many of them all the time. So I'm just going to leave that as a rhetorical comment. Special town meeting, there's no update. We have, the warrant is set, and hopefully we'll have a successful meeting.
Okay.
I'll leave it at that.
Other old business not reasonably anticipated. Doug?
None.
All right. There's no town administrator comments on here, did you?
Nope,
Okay.
I don't have any.
Selectmen's comments and opinions expressed by individual members do not necessarily reflect the views of the Board of Selectmen, and are the opinions and comments of only the individual member. Select Person Elwood.
All right. Where to begin? I guess I'll start with that last comment from Doug. I think when we get an update on the emergency management shelter, which you plan on giving at each meeting, I would appreciate an update on any expenditures that can be directly tied to it as part of that update.
That makes sense.
So, okay, I think that's reasonable.
Yep, very.
What's unreasonable is this. I don't know what the hell this is. This was a pre-planned ambush of a member of this board by another member of this board. I'm obviously going to take some time to go through this, but I think it's unbelievably unprofessional we talk about grandstanding and blindsiding. This is outrageous. I don't even know what's in here. Every audit that happened while I was treasurer was spotless, and I challenge anyone out there to show me something other than that. I won't get into my opinions of Eric Kirchhoff and his abilities, but I'll just let y'all think about that. Scott, if you're taking my questioning of this as anything other than looking out for the taxpayers, I apologize. That is not my intention. I grew up in a firefighter house. My father was a chief in Boston. I appreciate everything that you do. I know what a thankless job it is. And I didn't mean that to come across that I don't trust you. I don't think we should replace you. I just thought that we could have maybe handled it differently and maybe save the town some money. That's it. And if I offended you by doing that, that was absolutely not my intention. So I hope you accept my apology for that. Again, I'll just reiterate, the state has failed. This emergency shelter program is a failure. Governor Healy, you during your campaign, you talk about, we saw those commercials, you're a point guard, you're a playmaker, a facilitator. Well, start. You've been in 10 months now. The honeymoon's over. Get your bleep together. Make sure that these people have everything that they need. Because I can't, how does a hotel not provide everything? How does the National Guard not have items? Why are we expected to do this? Get your together, please. That's it.
Thank you, John. Select Person Childs.
Yeah, I would just like to congratulate Mr. Whitman and South Shore Taekwondo for raising $6,000 for breast cancer causes. I was thrilled to be a counter at the Kickathon. It was really fun. And in October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and they raised $6,000 going to Susan G. Komen and other foundations. And that's who we are. That's it.
Thank you, Laura. Select Person Shortall.
I need to start out by apologizing, Scott. If I offended you in any way, I am really sorry. It was not my intention to question your purchases or anything. My total reason for questioning was I've had senior citizens who have made comments about the fact, sure, now we're supplying My concern was taxpayers need information. That's all I was trying to point out. You know, if we're doing an unusual expense, then people need a chance to digest it. They need to be able to look at it. If you said to these people, are you going to deny them a bar of soap? Are you going to? No, of course they wouldn't. But they look at it as some of these people are just eking out a living. Social Security is not easy to live on. So their concerns are, sure, now the town's going to pick up this. I just wanted to put it out on the table. I did not intend to offend you. I have highest regard for you. I always have. I have high regards for Doug. I have high regards for this board. I believe the more informed we are from the sources and not from social media, the better we can all make peace with things. We can all have a way. We all have to live together. We're all like pieces of a big puzzle. So the more we can stay informed and the more we can work together, we're all going to make it through. Because otherwise, we're all going to cut each other's throats. So that was my intention. I deeply apologize if you're offended. Doug, I deeply apologize if you're offended. It was not my intention. I have high regards for this town. I've lived here all my life. Plan on living here until I'm planted. So I'm going to keep fighting for it. I'm going to keep fighting for the taxpayers of this town because I live with them. I live with a grumpy one at home. So. Sorry, but thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Vice Chairman Needham?
I just want to thank Chief Duffy and all of the members of the emergency management team that are present. I'd like to thank Administrator Lapp, and the members of the board, and everyone. This is all in real time, and it's been a lot, and the community's doing its best to be equipped. And I just wanted to thank everyone who is doing that. As Superintendent Cron, actually, no, I'm sorry, as Chief Duffy had mentioned, you know, remembering back that we all come from somewhere. The last few weeks, I thought a lot about my great-grandparents and how they were actually on the last boat before World War II, coming from Ireland. And long story short, it's just something that I was thinking about, and how when they did arrive, the welcome and support that they must have received. It's probably one of the reasons why I'm here today. But with that said, I want to thank the members of the emergency management team, because there's been so much to adjust to so quickly, and with the hopes that we as a community can continue to work together to do what's needed.
Thank you, Tiffany. So I'll make it quick. We've been here for a while. John, I do agree with you. The state has dropped the ball immensely. I have no disagreement on that. You know, I think my only thought as far as the payment of this bill all along has been the purchases have been made, and we have a vendor that we don't need to put in the middle of this fight between us and the state. But with that said, I also think that in leadership positions, you're asked to make, you know, leadership decisions, difficult decisions, unpopular decisions, and popular decisions in real time, and it's easy to question that after the fact, or say that something should have been done differently, or communicated out differently. But you know, the people that we have in place, I trust, are very capable of providing the resources and addressing the needs of the citizens of the town of Rockland. We put them there. We hired them, and you know, with that, we have to support them. And it's always proper to question. There's nothing improper. That's our job, to question. I I question things all the time. I mean, these guys hear from me every day of the week, and I have questions and I get the answers. And I think that that's just the way we got to just look at it and continue to empower our department heads to run their departments, because they are the experts and they report back to us, and we address it. We address it in a manner that we're comfortable with it going forward. And with that said, I just want to thank everybody that's part of the emergency shelter team. This is uncharted territory. It's not precedented in this town. Nobody's got a playbook for this, and I think you guys have done yeoman's work to this point and continue to do so. So, with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor? Select person Childs.
Yes?
Select person Elwood.
Yes.
Select person Shortall.
Yes.
Vice Chair Neal.
Yes.
And myself. Thank you, everyone.